Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, October 28th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. IDF chief says the Gaza war is not yet over. So the head of the Israeli military said on Monday that Israel's military campaign in Gaza is not over until all the bodies of deceased Israeli hostages are recovered, and he suggested that what he calls the campaign against Hamas would continue after that. So this is the quote here from IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General E.L. Zamir. He said, quote, "The war is not yet over. We must complete our sacred mission of bringing the fallen hostages home and continue the campaign against Hamas," end quote. So he said this at a military conference that was held in Israel on Monday. So while there has been a de-escalation in Gaza, as we have been covering, Israeli forces have continued launching attacks since the ceasefire went into effect on October 10th. And comments from President Trump have also made clear that Israeli officials are eager to restart the full-scale genocidal campaign in Gaza that they were waging before, and that they would do so if he gave the word. Trump has actually said, I believe he's used this language, that he's holding Israel back. So Zamir's comments came on the same day that Hamas returned another Israeli body, leaving a total of 12 deceased hostages under the rubble in Gaza. Israel has handed over at least 195 Palestinian bodies to Gaza in exchange. And so this seems to be, something that we keep hearing about, is the accusation from Israeli officials. Even though it was clear at the time of the signing of the ceasefire deal that many of these bodies would be hard to find. You even have Israeli officials saying before the deal was signed that some of them may never be found. But despite that, they tried to use the fact that Hamas didn't release hand over all the remains right away. They tried to use that to blow up the ceasefire deal. And now we continue to see accusations from Israel that Hamas is delaying handing over the bodies. But we have seen expanded efforts inside Gaza to locate them. There's reporting on Monday that said Hamas has actually entered Israeli-controlled parts of Gaza with the Red Cross to try to find some of these bodies, and apparently they've told the mediators that they believe they know where 7 to 9 of the 12 bodies are located and that they need to be dug out of the rubble. I mean, you see the pictures. It's just the amount of rubble, the destruction caused by the Israeli military campaign is just, it's just completely horrific. And, we're always talking about the Israeli bodies under the rubble, not to mention the estimated 9,500 to 10,000 people who are Palestinians who are missing and presumed dead under the rubble. Just think about all the work it's going to take to get them out, all of the Palestinian families who are never going to have the closure of finding the remains of their loved ones and all the explosives and everything in that rubble. Just a monumental task. All right, so the next one here, Israeli drone attack in Gaza kills 2 Palestinians. 2 Palestinians were killed and several others were injured by an Israeli drone attack near Khan Yunis in southern Gaza on Monday, according to a report from the Palestinian news agency Wafa. The attack targeted a group of Palestinians in the town of Abbasan al-Kabira, east of Khan Yunis, who were reportedly inspecting their homes in the area. According to the Times of Israel, the Israeli military claimed that it targeted a group of Palestinians who crossed the yellow line, referring to the line that IDF troops withdrew to under the ceasefire deal. The IDF claimed that the group posed a threat, but did not even allege that they were armed, and this is the claim that we see that the Israeli military has killed dozens of Palestinians since the truce went into effect, who allegedly crossed this yellow line, including 7 young children who were blown up in a vehicle that, again, allegedly crossed this line that to people on the ground is invisible. And according to Israeli media, Israeli ministers, as we covered yesterday, discussed the policy last week at a security cabinet meeting, with a military official stating that any adult who crosses the line will be shot. The official said that if a child crosses, then we'll arrest them. And then he had Ben Gvir chime in and say, hey, why don't we kill them? Why don't we shoot the children too? And we have actually seen them kill children in this way. And Israel Katz, the defense minister, concluded the conversation by saying that anyone who approaches the line should know that they may be harmed. So if you see this picture here, you see an Israeli bulldozer with next to a concrete block that's painted yellow with a yellow sign on it. Apparently, the IDF has been placing these every 200 meters or so to mark the line. But according to Palestinians on the ground, in some areas, it's still not clear at all where the line is. So this is Mohammed Khalid Abu El Hussein, who is a 31-year-old father of 5 in southern Gaza. He told The Guardian on Sunday, quote, "In our area, the yellow lines are not clearly visible. We don't know where they start or end. I think they're clearer in other places, but here, nothing is defined. As soon as we get close to our homes, bullets start flying from every direction, and sometimes small drones, the quadcopters, hover above us, watching every move. Yesterday, I was with my friend when we suddenly came under heavy gunfire. We threw ourselves to the ground and stayed there until the shooting stopped. I couldn't reach my house," end quote. And for this arrangement to be acceptable during a ceasefire, this idea of not making it, clearly marking the line or, making attempts to detain people instead of just shooting them, blasting them, killing them, it just goes to show how one-sided this whole ceasefire deal is. Like, this would be any scenario where 95 Palestinians, according to the health ministry's numbers, 95 have been killed since the ceasefire went into effect. I mean, just imagine the reverse situation, that somehow 95 Israelis were killed, or even 95 IDF troops were killed. How would that be acceptable to the U.S. or Israel as part of this deal here? All right, so the next one here, Hamas says that factions agree on post-war Gaza governance. So this article's from Middle East Eye. So the leader of Hamas's Gaza branch, Khalil al-Hayya, has said that the movement has reached an agreement with Palestinian factions, including Fatah, on the framework for post-war governance. In an interview with Al Jazeera on Sunday, Hayya confirmed that Hamas had agreed to a list presented of national figures with no political affiliation to form a committee to manage Gaza affairs. He stated that Hamas is ready to hand over full control, including security, to the committee. Hayya also emphasized that Hamas had no objection to any national figure residing in Gaza taking charge of the administration. He added that Hamas would not interfere in the committee's work, but called for its swift establishment. The committee's mandate would end when general elections are held or a Palestinian unity government is formed, he said. He added that Hamas aims to work toward elections as a way to reunite the Palestinian people under a single government. Meanwhile, Fatah, Hamas's main political rival, denied agreeing to the leadership of the post-war governance committee. Fatah spokesman Abdel Fattah Dula, in a statement reported by the official news agency Wafa, reiterated that the head of the committee should be a minister from the Palestinian Authority. So some conflicting things here from Hamas and Fatah, which essentially is the Palestinian Authority, saying that they didn't agree on exactly who would take over here. But this is, outlined in that, this, what they call it, a technocratic committee a committee of Palestinian technocrats, whatever exactly technocrat means in that context. But as I understand, like, the idea, there would be prominent people in the community, businessmen, people like that who would take over the governance. And Hayya also confirmed that Palestinian factions agreed to allow an international force to secure Gaza's borders, monitor the ceasefire, and ensure neither side violates it. He welcomed the inclusion of Arab and Muslim forces in this international mission, but insisted that their role would be limited to border security and ceasefire monitoring with no operations inside Gaza. So there's so many unanswered questions, about this deal. Is it going to really take shape, or, are we going to see Israel just try to maintain this occupation of Gaza where they control 58% of the territory? Oh, one thing I should have mentioned, I think I forgot, in that first story there, when we're talking about the bodies, according to Ynet, the Israeli news site, Israel is asking the U.S. for permission to take more territory in Gaza as a way to pressure Hamas over the bodies, or at least that's the excuse there. But just another sign that Israel does not want to abide by this ceasefire. And as I understand, the aid levels are still nowhere near what Israel agreed to under the deal. All right, to get into some Venezuela stuff here. Third U.S. bomber flight near Venezuela. So 2 U.S. B-1B Lancer bombers departed the U.S. and flew near the coast of Venezuela on Monday, according to flight tracking data in the latest U.S. provocation aimed at the country and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro. So the flight marks the third time that U.S. bombers have flown near Venezuela since October 15th, signaling that these types of provocations will be a regular occurrence. According to Air and Space Forces magazine, the bombers took off from the Grand Forks Air Base in North Dakota and refueled over Florida on their way to the Caribbean. Flight trackers show that the bombers flew parallel to Venezuela's coast, south of small islands that are part of Venezuela's territory. So they're very close to the coast. I don't know exactly the mileage, but they were definitely close. And all of the U.S. bombers that have made the flight to the waters near Venezuela since October 15th have kept their transponders on, and which that means that they want to be seen. And this is a lot, there's a lot of psychological operations going on here. The latest bomber flight comes after the U.S. War Department announced that it was deploying an aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, and its strike group to the waters near Venezuela, which will mark a significant escalation of U.S. firepower in the region. Reports have indicated that the U.S. is preparing to bomb Venezuela amid U.S. strikes on boats in the region, and of course, drug trafficking is the pretext, but U.S. officials have been clear that they want regime change, and President Trump has confirmed that he signed off on the CIA conducting covert operations inside Venezuela, and the Venezuelan government claimed on Sunday that it captured mercenaries linked to the CIA who were coming from Trinidad and Tobago, where the U.S. just docked a warship. The Venezuelan government said that it determined that that they were planning some sort of false flag attack inside Venezuela. All right, so the next one here, Senator Rick Scott says Maduro's days are numbered. So Senator Rick Scott, Republican from Florida, said in an interview with 60 Minutes that aired over the weekend that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's days are numbered, comments that come amid all this tensions and U.S. military buildup in the campaign in the Caribbean. Scott said, quote, "If I was Maduro, I'd head to Russia or China right now. His days are numbered. Something's going to happen, whether it's internal or external. I think something is going to happen," end quote. So I think this is a look into kind of the mentality. We've seen all these indications that people within the administration are telling Trump, we keep escalating the pressure. Eventually, Maduro's going to flee or someone's going to take him out in his inner circle. But obviously that has not happened. And Rick Scott, he's a Republican senator from Florida. And there's a big constituency there of people who want this war in Venezuela, who want the U.S. to keep sanctions on Cuba. And he was a major supporter of the failed U.S. regime change effort in Venezuela that was attempted during the first Trump administration, which involved sanctions, very heavy sanctions, and backing Juan Guaido, who the U.S. declared as who the U.S. declared was the interim president of Venezuela. And obviously his attempt at taking power failed pretty miserably. And Scott was speaking very highly of it back then. He met with Guaido at one point. So Scott also told 60 Minutes that he would be surprised if the U.S. invades Venezuela. And he claimed that if Maduro is toppled, it would also be the end of Cuba, vowing that the U.S. is going to, he's framing this as in the context of spreading freedom and democracy. Really kind of sounds like a neocon, the way he's talking about this. And so the U.S. senator was asked if the U.S. would be willing to put boots on the ground in Venezuela. And he said something interesting here. He said that the American public is tired of forever wars right now, making the idea of sending troops difficult. But he suggested that other countries might be willing to send troops, which I haven't seen any indication that there's any country out there that wants to. Maybe some mercenaries from Colombia, although you have the spat with between Trump and Petro at this point. So one of the U.S.'s biggest allies in the region is actually against all this. What is Trinidad going to send a few troops there? So while Scott doubts the U.S. will invade or send troops to Venezuela, there was a report from the Washington Examiner that U.S. military planners believe the forces in the region are now sufficient to seize and hold key strategic facilities such as ports and airfields on Venezuelan territory. So that would be, if they try to actually take ports, take territory inside Venezuela, obviously that would require U.S. boots on the ground. And I really don't put it past this administration. I do not envision like a full-scale invasion, but I could see like kind of decapitation strikes against Maduro and his government, coupled with maybe seizing some airfields and ports, or trying to. I know one of the little islands, Venezuela's little islands, is a military base there. So maybe they might try to grab some of those islands or something. Either way, it's all completely just crazy. And I wouldn't put it past them to send U.S. troops into danger over this. All right, so the next one here, Senator Rand Paul slams extrajudicial killings at sea. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So Rand Paul, again, blasted President Trump's strikes on alleged drug traffickers as unconstitutional and illegal. He said this on Fox News on Sunday, quote, "A briefing is not enough to overcome the Constitution. The Constitution says that when you go to war, Congress has to vote on it. The drug war or the crime war has typically been dealt with through law enforcement. And so far they have alleged that these people are drug dealers, and we have had no evidence presented. So at this point, we would call them extrajudicial killings," end quote. And so, as I've probably said this a lot on here, but it's not only that the public's not getting any evidence of these allegations that the Pentagon is making about these boats. It's Congress, the high-level congressional officials that get briefed on this stuff, they're not getting anything either. And I think it really goes to show that they don't know. They have no idea who they're bombing. They don't know the names of the people that they're killing, yet they label them narco-terrorists basically to justify killing them like in this way. All right, so the next one here, UNIFIL peacekeepers shoot down Israeli drone. So this article is from Jason Ditz. So Israel and the UNIFIL peacekeepers, these are the UN peacekeepers in southern Lebanon. They have a troubled history, and there's been some recent incidents with Israeli drones dropping grenades on them or near them. So then UNIFIL reported on Sunday that an Israeli drone was flying overhead in an aggressive manner, and that the UNIFIL neutralized it, meaning that they shot it out of the sky. The IDF maintains that the drone was just conducting surveillance and posed no threat to the UN personnel. But again, we've seen these drones drop grenades. And the UNIFIL, they have white trucks, blue uniform, the blue helmets. They're very, if you're flying a drone overhead, you know who they are on the ground. So you can't accidentally drop grenades on them multiple times. So another thing that happened, so after they shot down the drone, another Israeli drone dropped a grenade on a UNIFIL patrol in the same area. Oh, sorry. I got that mixed up. That was earlier in the day. Before they shot down this drone, one of the drones dropped a grenade. And then after they shot down the drone, the IDF sent another one to the site and dropped yet another grenade, reportedly, according to Israeli media, so that the downed drone could not be recovered by anyone. So it doesn't really help their story here. If it was just a surveillance drone, why would they have to blow it up? But again, we've seen the IDF repeatedly do this and drop grenades near this UNIFIL force, which Israel is very open about the fact that they don't want these UN peacekeepers in the area. All right, so the next one here, U.S. Army colonel found that the IDF intentionally killed Shireen Abu Akleh. So a retired U.S. Army colonel who was involved in the investigation into the Israeli military killing of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh has revealed that he found the shooting was intentional. Sorry, I jumbled that up. He just recently revealed that he found the shooting was intentional just right after she was killed. So Abu Akleh, who was a veteran Al Jazeera reporter, very well known, and she was also a Christian, Maronite Catholic. She was killed by the Israeli military while reporting on an IDF raid in the Jenin refugee camp in the Israeli-occupied West Bank on May 11th, 2022. She was shot in the head while wearing a vest that was clearly marked with the word press. So Colonel Steve Gabovish, I should have double-checked how to pronounce his name. But this is the colonel who was in charge of the investigation. And he told Zeteo reporter Mehdi Hassan, quote, "My findings were beyond a reasonable doubt that it was an intentional killing of Shireen Abu Akleh," end quote. And he said that he came to this conclusion within 10 days of her killing. So despite Gabovich's findings, the Biden administration, their State Department, claimed in a statement issued on July 4th, 2022, so a few months after he came to that conclusion, that the shooting was unintentional and the result of tragic circumstances. And again, this is an American, a woman with American citizenship. Gabovich told Hassan that his boss at the time, Lieutenant General Michael R. Fenzel, who led the U.S. Security Coordinator Liaison Office for Israel, took the word of an Israeli general over his findings. Gabovich said that General Yehuda Fox, the head of Israel's Central Command at the time, told Fenzel that an Israeli soldier may have killed Abu Akleh, but that it was an accident and that it was a matter of tragic circumstances, the same language used in the Biden administration's statement. So Hassan asked Gabovich that the U.S. general took the word of a foreign general over his own officer who he sent to investigate, and Gabovich answered, yes, that is what happened. So he first shared his story as an anonymous source for a Zeteo documentary titled Who Killed Shireen? And he revealed his identity in an interview with the New York Times on Monday and said that he came forward because of his frustration with the case. The retired U.S. colonel, who was a career military policeman and served 30 years, told the Times that he and his colleagues were flabbergasted by the Biden administration's statement on Abu Akleh's killing, and the fact that the State Department avoided calling it intentional continued to be on my conscience nonstop. He said, quote, "The favoritism is always toward the Israelis. Very little of that goes to the Palestinians," end quote. And this is a 30-year career U.S. military policeman in the U.S. Army who came out and said this because of the way he felt about how it was covered up. And I mean, it was very obvious at the time that she was killed intentionally. Again, wearing the big blue vest that said press. Israel initially claimed that there was Palestinian fighters in the area, but that turned out not to be true. There was no evidence of that. Again, an American journalist killed in this way, and the Biden administration covered for Israel, and the American general in Israel covered for Israel over an American citizen who was killed. And I remember the Israeli police attacked her funeral. There's pictures of the police, like they hit some of the pallbearers carrying her coffin, which I remember had a crucifix on it because she was Catholic. Anyway, so the next one here, Zelensky vows to expand strikes inside Russia. So Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday that Ukraine was working to expand long-range attacks inside Russia with a focus on targeting oil refineries. Zelensky said that he held a meeting with arms manufacturers that produce long-range weapons, and he said, quote, "We reviewed the effectiveness of our long-range strikes over a defined period and the results achieved. Russian oil refining is already paying a tangible price for the war and will pay even more. We set tasks to expand the geography for the use of our long-range capabilities," end quote. So far, the U.S. had denied Zelensky's request for Tomahawk missiles, which have a range of over 1,000 miles. It would be just a huge escalation if the U.S. supplied them. But according to media reports, the U.S. has been helping Ukraine with strikes deep inside Russia, including its drone attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. President Trump recently denied a report that said the U.S. approved the Ukrainian missile strikes inside Russia, but we did have the Ukrainian military claim to use Storm Shadow missiles in a strike on a Russian chemical plant, and if that's the case, those strikes require targeting data from the U.S. Haven't seen any more reports of Storm Shadows being used in Russia since then, but keeping an eye out for that. So while they're making a lot out of these Ukrainian attacks inside Russia, on the front lines in eastern Ukraine, Russia is continuing to make gains. They have entered the city of Pokrovsk, which was a city that they were pushing towards for many months now, and Russian forces are in there now. And that's in Donetsk. And Russia's demands for a peace deal include Ukraine ceding Donetsk, ceding the Donbass region. They control just a small sliver of territory in Luhansk. And Trump has reportedly told Zelensky to take the deal, but it doesn't look like he's really threatening to pull support if he doesn't or anything like that. So the war continues. All right, so the next one here, Trump says that we have nuclear submarines right off Russia's shore. So this article is from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. So following Russia's successful test of a new nuclear-powered cruise missile, President Donald Trump warned that the U.S. has a nuclear-armed submarine just off the Russian coast. Trump told reporters, quote, "They know we have a nuclear submarine, the greatest in the world, right off their shores. It doesn't have to go 8,000 miles," end quote. He added that Russia is not playing games with us and that the U.S. is not playing games with them either, kind of downplaying it, saying that we test missiles all the time. But saying that, oh, we got a nuclear submarine off their shores is a pretty provocative thing to say. But I guess it is the reality that these submarines are, constantly deployed, the nuclear armed submarines. And they actually do have, I forget the range, but they have ballistic missiles that have a very long range, thousands of miles on these submarines. So they don't actually need to be near Russia's shore to hit Russia. But I remember recently, after something Medvedev said, Trump announced that he was sending nuclear subs toward Russia. Again, just kind of an unnecessarily provocative thing to say when the reality is these submarines are out there and probably in striking distance of Russia most of the time anyway. All right. So the next one here, the U.S. launches 2 more strikes in Somalia. So U.S. Africa Command on Monday announced that its forces launched 2 more airstrikes in Somalia as the Trump administration continues to bomb the country at a record pace. The command said that both strikes targeted the ISIS affiliate in Somalia's northeastern Puntland region, where the U.S. is backing local forces. One strike was launched on October 24th and the other on October 26th. AFRICOM said that both attacks were conducted about 53 miles southeast of the Gulf of Aden port city of Bosaso, in this remote mountainous region where this war is taking place. AFRICOM offered no other details, that it has stopped sharing casualty estimates and assessments on civilian harm since April. Puntland officials have said they intensified operations against ISIS militants in the Kal Miskad Mountains with support from AFRICOM, according to a report from Garo Online. There have been relentless airstrikes against ISIS militants in the region, with multiple casualties reported, but the report did not provide a number on the casualties. Puntland officials claim that the ISIS militants are largely defeated, but this is something that they've been saying for a long time. And local sources told Garo Online, which is a Puntland-based media outlet, that the militants are still entrenched in the area and have resorted to guerrilla tactics and are constantly moving between caves and valleys. And as we've been covering, the U.S. they've really stepped up the airstrikes in Puntland. Pretty much all of them over the past month have been in Puntland, but the U.S. has also been backing the government based out of Mogadishu in its war against Al-Shabaab. And by my count, and I emailed AFRICOM to see if they would confirm that this is right or give me a number of airstrikes that they've launched this year. But by my count, these 2 airstrikes bring the total for the year to 86. And this is just unprecedented. No one's even come close to bombing Somalia this much. No U.S. president. Trump has shattered his own record of 63, which he set back in 2019. And for reference, Biden launched a total of 51 airstrikes in Somalia in 4 years. Obama launched 48 over 8 years. So again, when I say unprecedented, and I'm not exaggerating or anything, this really is unprecedented. And again, the local Puntland forces that the U.S. is backing keep saying that they declared victory a few months ago, but the battles go on. So who knows how long this is going to go on for. All right, so the next one here, Sudan's RSF storms El-Fasher after talks are shut down. So this article is from Middle East Eye. So Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces, the RSF, has stormed the North Darfur city of El-Fasher, I believe it's El-Fasher, prompting fears of widespread killings and abuses hours after ceasefire negotiations in Washington collapsed. There were hopes late last week that the U.S.-sponsored talks could achieve some sort of breakthrough. However, sources told Middle East Eye that the UAE, which is the RSF's most significant patron, refused to address the situation in El-Fasher, which has been under siege for over 500 days. And we've seen there's been starvation. People have starved to death, died of disease. It's a really horrific situation for the civilians who've been trapped there. On Sunday morning, RSF fighters entered the city where around 260,000 people have been trapped, seizing an army base and causing the defenses to collapse. The RSF claims that it is in control of the city, describing its capture as a decisive turning point after the paramilitaries had lost significant ground to the Sudanese armed forces in recent months. So far, the SAF and its allied joint forces have not commented on the developments, despite videos emerging that purport to show the RSF detaining and lashing people in and around El-Fasher. One video, which Middle East Eye was not able to independently verify, appeared to show fighters forcing some detained people to praise RSF leader Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, commonly known as Hemeti, before opening fire on them. Again, they said that was not confirmed, but the RSF has committed a lot of atrocities in Sudan. Both sides have committed atrocities. As I understand it, the RSF has done more worse things, it seems like, but it's just such an ugly war that just goes on. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints. One from Ted Snyder. U.S. officials disagree with Trump on Venezuela. One from Ron Paul. The Rubio Doctrine. Neocons are back. One from Medea Benjamin and Nicholas J.S. Davies. The world confronts the genocide Washington is trying to bury. One from Ted Galen Carpenter. NATO must say no to Ukraine no-fly zone. And our spotlight from Mike Fredenberg. Inflating Russian missile costs hides U.S. weapons crisis. So please go check all that out. Other stuff in the lower part of our page. Lots of content on antiwar.com for you to check out. Let's see. That is it for me for today. Please like, subscribe, comment, follow us on social media. If you listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or something, you can leave a review. I've had a lot of people message me over the years. Someone did again recently that they can't download the show on Apple Podcasts. It usually turns out that they're using a VPN, and I've had the same problem on my phone. If I was using a VPN before, I couldn't download an Apple Podcast. But just figured I'd mention that if some people have had that problem. But anyway, that is it for me for today. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.